episode of The Claw's Corner. Today's guest is an actor, musician, and activist. He first got his start in 1970 playing Chief Bromden in the original stage production of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He hasn't looked back since. His credits include the movies DC Cab, Heartbreakers, 42, and The Frontier, just to name a few. His television credits include Matlock, Murder, She Wrote, Home Improvement, Dexter, Mad Men, and The New Hawaii Five-0, again, just to name a few. He is most well known for his portrayal of Detective Stan Wojo-Howitz, better known as Wojo, on the classic series Barney Miller, which ran from 1975 to 1982. He most recently won the 2019 and the 2021 Daytime Emmy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role of Mike Corbin in the iconic soap opera General Hospital. So, without further ado, please welcome legendary actor, musician, and activist, Max Gail, to the Claw's Corner. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, so I have to say it wasn't the original stage production of Cuckoo's Nest.
Okay, we'll start right there.
Because the original was a Broadway show with starring Kirk Douglas, who had bought the rights to the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. For the really old people who will remember that was kind of a big novel of the 60s in a way, and so it didn't run for a real long time. It was the year Kennedy was killed.
Okay.
And then a number of years later, some guys in San Francisco took the play, but made it more like the book, because the book was narrated by this Chief Bromden. So they brought some speeches, and that got a foothold there, and then in New York, and then it started to get produced on college campuses and stuff. And it's sort of a revival that finally led to the money coming through in San Francisco from the guy that owned Fantasy Records and did the movie, and then that became Jack Nicholson won the Academy Award and stuff. So of that sort of story, was where I happened to kind of stumble into acting in a way, or find my way into it or something.
What was interesting when I was doing my research on that, you were the understudy at first. How'd you come from the understudy to the main actor, Chief Bromden? How'd that come about?
Okay, so first of all, the way it came about, that I was the understudy. I was then sort of bootlegging into a pretty much shut up hotel that still had a Earthquake Magoons, an old time Dixieland saloon down on the first floor, but the hotel had been closed. But if there were maybe 5 or 6 of us, living in rooms in the hotel down in Chinatown. And I happened to see that they had opened this production of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I walked by the Little Fox Theater. It was a little small theater that was decorated with stuff from a bigger Fox theater. So it was a kind of an elegant little small size theater. And then I was a bit later, I happened to be looking at the want ads, and they had put in mistakenly an ad for understudies. And over at the kind of main agency in San Francisco, they sent a thing, say, we need people to run the snack bar. And they got that straightened out. But I happened to see it. They were auditioning for understudies. They'd just gotten a good review from Herb Caen, who was like the main columnist in San Francisco. He was the most popular columnist. The regular theater critics didn't think much of it, but he gave it a rave, and they had a song. And it was a rainy day, and I was playing with the San Francisco rugby team, and I didn't, no practice. So anyway, I went down there and I auditioned. I thought for McMurphy, because that's what I thought, but the guy said, you'd be good for the Chief. There was a fella playing the Chief. He was a little shorter than I. Chief's supposed to be 6'7", like my friend Will Sampson, who ultimately played him in the movie, but they had lifts on him. So anyway, they said, well, if you'd be the understudy. What does that mean? Well, the guy might get sick, you'll have to come down and sort of rehearse where he's standing when the light comes on him, stuff like that, and then he may want some time off or something. But anyway, before I had a chance, and I was playing a 5 to 9 piano bar gig down at the Hyatt House down near the airport. And I took the law boards that week. I thought, because I could work a 5 to 9 job and make enough to live then, and maybe I'll go to school some more, but I got fired from that job and replaced by a guy that was brought up from the marina down in Southern California. He was very tan. He had these Renaissance collar shirts. He sat on a stool and played the guitar. Knew a whole bunch of contemporary songs that I didn't know, and I mean, it was, but right at that time, the guy who was playing the chief got in a kind of a, I guess you couldn't really call it a fight. He pushed one of the other actors after the curtain call. They had an artistic battle, as it turns out, going on. He was very method. Very, it's taking the mask off. It's, I mean, I suppose that's, if there was one way to go or the other, which there really isn't, that was the way I went. But the other actor was very technical. He didn't cry real tears, but he was so effective the way he broke down, and he related so strongly in his own life. He was playing a character having a hard time dealing with his sexuality. And he at that time was coming out in his own life, so, and this made the method guy really, really frustrated him that he was so, and he was, he was very sincere, but sometimes there was so much snot coming out of his nose, you couldn't understand what he was saying, really. Anyway, he got fired. Our cast said, we can't have that, he's a big weightlifter type, and the other guy was real, and I got this call, can you be at the theater at 6 o'clock? And they sort of walked me through where to stand in a way, and I and I did the play because there was, a lot of what he had to say was on tape, and after that I talked, the dressing room cleared out pretty quick, but the guy playing McMurphy, he gave his notice. He didn't want to stay there either, but he gave his notice, so now he's dealing with me, Have I gone on too long with this one question?
No, not at all.
Okay,
No, not at all.
So I said, well, have you got, any notes or anything to share with me? My mother had been an actress before she had 7 kids in 6 years. It wasn't, my twin sister and my brother would be much more likely. They've said, who's going to be in a TV show, they would have said them maybe before me, but still. And then when I was in graduate school at Michigan, I took a course you could take a course out of the business school, and I took a theater course. So it wasn't like it was the strangest thing in the world. I said, have you got any notes for me? And he says, yeah. He says, okay, when we sing the song, when the chief and McMurphy Chief speaks for the first time, McMurphy's figured out, for those that don't know the show, kind of watch the movie. So anyway,
great play, great movie.
So he's been faking deaf and dumb, for a long time. And so he speaks for the first time. And in that scene, some Canada geese fly by, and he goes, kind of says some of this song, and McMurphy says, I know that. And they do this song, one flew east, one flew west, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. He said, when we do that, don't be looking at our hands, look at me. And I got immediately, of course, okay. I said, anything else? And he said, no, the rest, he's pretty frustrated. The rest would take years of acting lessons, whatever. Yeah, I said, look, man, I'm here now, and I'll be back tomorrow night. And I don't have those years to do that, but like, if you've got something to share with me, share it, otherwise, fuck you, I guess. I don't know, I mean, whatever, you know what I mean? I wasn't looking to do any more than get him to share it with me, which he did. And he basically gave me, the nutshell kind of acting and what it is. He was a serious, committed, wonderfully talented, and so, that's how. So then I stayed with the play for quite a while, and I picked up some other acting jobs where they cast it in San Francisco, cast some of the smaller parts in San Francisco. The Organization, Sidney Poitier, the second Mr. Tibbs movie. I met Raul Julia, was wonderful. He's gone, left too soon, but wonderful, beloved, but talented. Ron O'Neill, and a bunch of actors out from New York. And I had met Robert Walden, who was the youngest person ever brought into the Actors Studio, and I got to meet actors. Some who came to see the play, probably came into the play for a while, just to get kind of an understanding of what that was about, And then I had like one line in Dirty Harry, I sort of watched them put this I just had this idea, he's going to go through this tunnel. They decided the night before, he and the director, well, let's do something in the tunnel. So the thing went out, and I was one of 3 people that were, got the call to come in and be a hood in the tunnel. What's in the bag, man?
Yeah.
And he could bring out his big Dirty Harry, but just so I had enough that I then headed down to, at a point, I'd done the play for 2 years, and it was time to check it out. I thought, before I head on, maybe continue toward Hawaii and around the globe, since I've been going west, and that's what I did.
They always say success is taking advantage of every opportunity, which sounds like you did. But at that time, did you want to be a musician more than an actor?
Well, I was, no, at that time I was following the acting, and I've always thought of myself as a musical rather than a musician. I mean, it depends, and it's all, kind of wordplay maybe, but there are people who really, in one sense, put in their 10,000 hours or whatever are called, or music, my dad used to say, music is a great slave, but a great servant, but a poor slave master. And I think that's, where he made his choices to feed his family and stuff like that, because he'd played piano and had a band, but he also put himself through college and started an office supply business. And, he had these other things that he did. And so, those were kind of the alternatives. And somewhere along the line, well, it can be a friend, it can be it can be part of you, So, but it was really a bit later that I started writing songs, or songs started coming to me, not like, oh, I'm going to try to write a song, but things would come to me, and mostly the rhyme and the thoughts, coming out. And then I would find my way to a keyboard, find some music that would turn it in,
Well, I had so much fun doing my research on you, and I love that YouTube has almost anything. So I was watching an old Folgers commercial with you and Noah Berry. That was hilarious. But there was something that I found very interesting. It was an old Bob Vila episode where he did a tour of your house with you and your family at the time. And what I found interesting about that is, while that house was being made, you mentioned that you lived in a teepee.
Yeah. Well, for one thing, that happened because my friend Jim Liu, who I knew from Chicago, we met because somebody that knew both of us knew that he'd been involved with some Native American things and stuff. But anyway, so Jim and I were friends, and he did Jim did a lot of diversity work, valuing differences workshops, and work with the Chicago PD, and he's just a really interesting guy that can help people in organizations, have a better conversation with each other. And so he was doing some work with Bob Vila, and Bob came over to the house, and at that point, that was my first wife had died. All the building of the house actually took place while I was single, and the guy made a deal with me. He would just kind of do his thing with the house, and that would be his way of showing other people he could do it. And we shared ideas and stuff. But anyway, so for my second wife, the place was kind of hot, but she loved Bob Vila because she was very much into doing things with her hand, very gifted, did all the tile work in the kitchen, and just had that kind of thing. So about other people who had been over sometimes for like sweat lodge ceremonies or something, other people who had bigger stars than I, let's just put it that way, or whatever that means, but that didn't really mean anything to Nan. Is that guy an actor? But Bob Vila, so when he said the place was cool, that was, so I agreed to let him do this video on the place, and that's still, floating around out there.
Yeah. I love what you can find on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
I want to go back to you writing music, because I heard a story that you were talking about, and it was the time you sang the song "We're Going to the Ocean by and By" on the Dinah Shore Show. So what is your connection to Frank Sinatra with that song?
I like this story. I mean, this is anyway. So all right. So when I did start writing, these songs started coming to me, and one of them actually showed up on a plane flying up to San Francisco, and it was a basic kind of another way of expressing that we're all part of the river of consciousness flowing into the great river of life flowing into the great ocean of consciousness. However, but it was a way that came through for me that way. Okay, and they had all the Barney Miller cast on the Dinah Shore Show. For those that go back, the landscape of afternoon TV was Dinah Shore. It wasn't the View, and so they had us all on, and they had us each. We were supposed to do a section, and they assigned us a producer, and the guy said, "So you can tell that story about how you got started." And I said, "Well, what story is that?" And he told me this story I'd never heard before. I said, "I don't know what that is, but I'd love to do a poem." And he went, "A poem, and a song if I get," because they actually assigned us a bunch of time, So anyway, I did the poem, and I got a lot of letters on it, actually. It's kind of just about changing and stuff. But the song I got one, and it was from a guy named Gordon Jenkins. I didn't know who that was, but he said that he felt the song he described it as a laughing pallbearer. So that's all right. It is about dying, but it's like. So let's be here and be alive while we are, and he had invited me to come to his home, and he wanted to make a tape of it in his studio, and I had followed up on it, and at one point I was asking my dad, because I got the feeling when I talked to him that he was a musician. Did you ever hear anybody named Gordon Jenkins? He said, "Oh, yes, Gordon Jenkins, of course, yes. Manhattan Serenade." Well, that was a long play musical, just music album, no songs on it, no show tunes, and that really kind of established that as something someone could do and sell, and there'd be a market for it, But he was a conductor and a arranger and a songwriter in some instances for Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland, and he was Quincy Jones of his era in a way. And the song, on his last album with Sinatra, he had a song. It was a very good year. If people know that, when I was 17, it was a very good year. And then the violins would come in, da 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 da. That was classic. This guy, Gordon Jenkins. And so I did that, and he was really, really nice, and recorded 5 or 6 songs. And then, he said, "I'd like to get this song to Mr. Sinatra." Unfortunately, I have to wait a bit because his wife, he was very kind of, had that 40s movie kind of grace, both he and his wife, very, very genuinely polite and all. His mother just died in a plane accident, so I'm going to have to wait a little bit, And I said, "Well, okay," because to me, Frank Sinatra at that time was, he was a Nixon guy. Kennedy had stood him up and embarrassed him and hurt his feelings. wouldn't land at it, come to his place like it was planned in Las Vegas, because his brother said, "You can't do that. You got a side chick with this, also with this Chicago, gambling gangster guy." So anyway, all of that, the sides that we know or don't. Anyway, so and then I'll promise to give short answers from now on.
No, I'm enjoying this. I know my viewers will too.
Oh, well, so what happened was I never did that. I mean, I around the same time, a friend of mine had shared some of my songs with an artist named Buffy St. Marie, who Buffy's Native American singer, songwriter, right around the time that Dylan and Joan Baez and things started to sort of move away from straight ahead folk music and more about what the things that were going on and the times changing. And, of course, Pete Seeger was there all along, and, but Buffy was, she had a number of hit songs, and her message, and as far as Native American people had been treated and all got her kind of blacklisted from the radio, she was at the time on Sesame Street with her new baby and her husband. And, Buffy was a school teacher originally. She's just a very proactive person. She recently in her, older than I, a couple of years ago, won the pop or the rock and roll album of Canada. She's still very alive and creative. But anyway, I through her, I met a lot of these Native American people that I'd been watching in the news with the American Indian movement and reassertion of sovereignty rights and a lot of things that were going on, environmental consciousness, a lot of things. And so I went up to talk with her, and that's where I met people. And the tour she was looking to put together just didn't pencil out, as they say. But I started spending time with Floyd Westerman, who was a singer-songwriter. A lot of people might know him ended up with an acting career. So he was in Dances with Wolves, played the old chief, was on Roseanne, and was in a number of films, but globally known as a singer-songwriter. And but others, it just was, for me, it was a way of connecting me to something in life that gave understandings to everything from my kind of Protestant Christian upbringing to my science to engineering to economics arc of education, and all of that. So that's kind of where my thing went. But somewhere down the road, as I was getting married for the first time, and my wife said, "We got some friends of mine together, so they got to get Max in the studio and record some songs." And they organized that and did that, and that was one of the ones we did. And two of the fellows, Merle Saunders, the wonderful keyboard master from San Francisco, and in a moment, I'll think of my other dear friend whose name I'm blanking on, but I know just as well. But anyway, a wonderful saxophone player. But they both wanted to write string sections. And I told them, and I said, I told them about Gordon Jenkins. I said, maybe I should give him a call, and they said, "Yes, you dumbass, you should give him a call." And I did. And his wife answered, and she said, "Oh, yes, Max, Gordon talks about you often. He can't come to the phone right now. I'm sure he would like to do what you're proposing, but he can't come to the phone right now because he has throat cancer, so he can't speak. But if you could come by tomorrow." So, well, tomorrow I'm getting on a plane to go to New York to start rehearsing this play I'm doing, a one-man play on Babe Ruth. And, "Oh, well, then maybe when you get back." Yeah. So I'm in New York about 3 or 4 days, and I end up with some people from the cast, and we're in one of the theater bars, Elaine's, I think it was, and just hanging out and tables pushed together. And I'm talking with some old Tin Pan Alley guys, some real old time songwriters. And one of them says, "Oh, did you hear about Gordon? They went, yeah. And I said, you mean Gordon Jenkins by any chance? He said, yeah. You mean because he's sick? No, he passed away last night. So that was a great lesson in life of following up, or, recognize whatever. I mean, it's all good, but that's as close as I ever got to Frank Sinatra. if that's the hook on the story, Anyway.
No, that's a great story. You talked about the plight of the Native Americans and their problems. Is that what prompted you to form Full Circle?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Actually, it was. I'm thinking of that word plight, which I mean, it is a plight. And at the same time, there's this robust, profound, life of a people, a very, rich human beings who were here for a long time and had all the profoundness of all the other sort of came from over there, various religions and philosophies and all of that, So, but definitely enduring a kind of a Holocaust on a number of levels, from just illnesses to misunderstandings and abuse and all of that. So it is a kind of it is a plight. That's a good word, and at the same time, what I was able to find, and a lot of it because I was identified. So I was identified in a way that, and with something that was like smart humor, and heartfelt, and those are things that matter a lot in the Indian world. And they have I mean, to be very sort of stoic and solid, which, anybody gets when they're around people that don't have a clue, it's what other reaction is there to it,
Yeah.
And, but I just, so along that way, as that happened, it was also for me, it was like, as the show became popular, it was like, well, what do you do with all this attention? There'll be a whole bunch of articles or interviews that are kind of set up because that's what the interview is with the young person that just got a new series, and there's little acknowledgments of, that, oh, I see you have an earring, or something, what I mean? That's just how it was, and trying to turn that around and make it mean something that felt meaningful, like was tricky, so even trying to do something directly connecting, sometimes it wouldn't be there, or the wonderful actor helps the poor downtrodden Indians or something. But around just the year before our last year, portable video was showing up. The news, most major city news teams had their 3/4-inch field cassettes, on their camera that they could go out and shoot, on location. And it wasn't in the stores yet, but the 1/2-inch, the kind of battle between two formats was going on. But the cameras were seated out amongst the cameramen, so they were available. And I just felt there was a way to share all that was going on in my life, including, as much whatever I could, like of like backstage with Barney Miller, but really to tie that together with these other experiences I was having, whether they were, benefit concerts in urban areas, or they were on the res or whatever, that there was a life there, that that was there to share. And in a certain way, it seemed like, if that, Saturday Night Live had come on. So there was this idea of something was sort of outside the framework, and there was CBS had their Sunday morning show with Charles Kuralt, kind of on the road, we say, well, what if you had not trying to do Saturday Night Live on the, but to open up the sensibilities to a different generation and how people are looking and kind of how people are holding conversations, and just make shooting of it and cameras being around a part of how the story tells itself. And then that could be what I was shooting for was the nighttime opposite Johnny Carson. because ABC couldn't do anything with it. Unfortunately, during that time, we had the Iranian hostage crisis, and Nightline came on the air. And Nightline became, nothing was going to move it out of that spot. Nothing did for 25 years or whatever, And the executives who would come over and watch us tape, late in the evening, we were their grown-up show. They had the A-Team with #1 show, but we were like number 10, but we got the Peabody Award. We were, so they'd come and hang, and I would pitch them about that time slot, which they couldn't find anything to get a hold in. So, but that got closed by bigger forces in the world. And then the show ended, and their interest in anything I might be doing ended. And I got married and had a kid, and then found out my wife was sick and dealt with that, and so on and so forth. And all that video has it's brought me into other things in my life. It got me into the kind of digital divide work, because I was looking for, well, what could I do with this now? Back in the early 90s. And, the computers were starting to get into households. There were a lot of households that couldn't afford it. So I was interested in, how do we get this conversation? I was a bit ahead of my time in terms of where we were going to be with bandwidth and stuff around doing just like what we're doing now with Zoom, how simple it is. But, it was still a long ways away, but it seemed like it was time to think about it,
Yeah. So that was a production company, Full Circle's a production company
that
you started.
Yes. Yeah. And my friend Shingoose came up with the name Full Circle.
Love it. Because, well, it's funny, similar to what Marlon Brando did at the Oscars. He wanted to promote what the Native Americans were, and he had a Native American accept his Oscar when he won years ago. So I like the fact that people like you, Marlon Brando, they were letting people know, it's like, no, they're people too. They have their own life, and things should be happening to them. They treat them just like you would treat me.
Yeah, I was I was influenced by what I knew, which was not very much, about Marlon Brando. I remember my mother once, when I was like summer before 7th grade, I got my idea, and I took the money I earned and went and got the clothes I wanted, which were, real hoodie, pink and turquoise. And I had my, and my mother got it. My sister never like, what the? But I remember saying a real Marlon Brando, and I had no idea what that was, but I knew it was good in some kind of way, So it wasn't so much him as an actor, but I was aware that he was an actor who had expressed, because he provided some really significant support for the people up in the salmon fishing rights, where they were just getting arrested and beat up and attacked and everything, for what now they asserted those sovereignty rights, and now they have co-management with the state and federal, so he, I knew that about him more. There was only when I did start getting into acting and stuff, and then I got like who Marlon Brando was in that world, in a sense. So there was that, and there was, I just kept finding, first of all, things that really put, the whole economic question, is it capitalist or communist, that we're still, now we took care of the communists, and now the socialists, who used to be kind of in the middle, what I mean? But this kind of thing all around ideas that came with the Industrial Revolution, and how to deal with with these powers that had come out of the box, that we're still trying to figure out how to deal with. But neither of those really, I heard this joke once from Senator Cranston. Alan Cranston was a senator in California. So as it goes back a while, but it says, you hear they found the difference between communism and capitalism. And I say, no, I did. He says, yeah. Communism is man exploiting man, and capitalism is just the other way around.
Very true.
You know,
Very
there's something
true.
within humankind that will,
Yeah.
if there's a way for power to find it, you know,
Yeah.
and all of that, you know, and nothing is purely communist or purely capitalist and all of that. And yes, there are places, and certainly when you have, you know, the kinds of, you know, the kinds of people running governments in ways and doing the absolutely outrageous things that have happened under communism. But we can't forget that absolutely outrageous things have happened under capitalism too. I'm not equating them, but I'm saying another conversation. And for me, it was like, well, here's a whole other way of looking at how we deal with the resources and stuff that puts it in the context of the relationship of all of life, which scientifically is more and more understood, not less, you know, and spiritually, you know, certainly as we can't deny that there are other ways, you know, even if our way says it's the only way, we still know there's some other ways, you know. So it was really, you know, really meaningful at that time to have that sort of heart and mind opening and connection. Yeah.
There's another documentary that you were the narrator for, and I want to talk about this because you mentioned earlier that your first wife was sick. And there's a documentary, I watched it the other night, and it's people who have not watched it, you definitely have to see it. It's on YouTube, it's available. It's called Hoxie, When Healing Becomes a Crime. Tell me how you got involved with that one.
All right, so was sought after by Kenny Ausubel, who he and his partner is they created after this, they created something called Bioneers, kind of like pioneers, but Bioneers. And they've been meeting a big yearly gathering of people who are into ecology and, you know, the whole, all that, let's say, goes with putting those ideas and concepts together. You know, what's the biologically, naturally good way to move forward as a human species. And but this was kind of on his path to learning that. His father had cancer. And it was after his father passed that he found that there were other ways, other approaches that might have been beneficial for his dad. And he explored, well, why didn't he know any of that? And that's what Hoxie was really about. Is I think it was, the subtitle was The Quack Who Cured Cancer, but basically it was looking at that whole notion in the history of the AMA in terms of how it had resisted certain ways of looking at things and understanding things. And he knew that, you know, he knew my story somehow, and he approached me and said, would you be willing to narrate this? And I said yes. And he's still one of my you know, inspirations, the two of them, in terms of how their sincerity and their smarts and their consistency. And, you know, I've had my own ideas around LAP, and I love to share them and all like that. But in terms of that organizational skill and follow through and stuff, I have to say, there's a reason I'm an actor, you know.
What got me so mad about the documentary is I used to be a manager of Rite Aid for 10 years and a manager of CVS for 4 years. I worked with many pharmacists over the years. So talking to them, and I always tell them, I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think there has to be a cure for cancer. But the thing is, it's a moneymaker. And if they cured it, they would lose out on so much. And every pharmacist I worked with in the 14 years said, no, I agree with you. I believe that there is something to that. And watching this documentary, there's proof where Hoxie's father found this serum. He created, so he says, whatever you do, don't overcharge people. If they can't afford it, just treat them anyway. It's just about taking care of people. And he goes, that was on his deathbed. Then the AMA, the American Medical Association, came up and said, we want to buy it from you. He said, okay. And he says, as long as you don't overcharge people, I don't really care. We're going to charge people what we want. If they can't afford it, that's their problem. And he said, well, you're not getting it. And that's when the big controversy started. And even before that, he was considered a quack, but that's when they really went after him and started raiding his place. And I like the fact he just kept going at it. He goes, come here, I don't really care. He got arrested, I think, over 100 times. And he said, I don't really care what happens to me. And they had more than enough people say, I was given a month to live. Now it's been 20 years. I'm cancer free. there's more than enough evidence to show that there was something to that serum and there was a cure to cancer. And they were more interested in money. And I like what they said too. They're, oh yeah, sure, you get it from herbs. What do you think pharmaceuticals are made from? Herbs, plants, all this medication. Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It was a great documentary. I highly recommend people see. It's called Hoxie, When Healing Becomes a Crime. And there's so many people out there that just, they should have options. There was a doctor on there, you can sort of tell he didn't want to say it, but he did anyway. He said, I really don't believe in this, but he goes, it's not my option. If they want to go for it, then let them go for it. But I think a lot of doctors are more just reading the script because they want to keep their job and they don't want to stir the, rock the boat and say what they really feel.
Like most of us, most of the time, in a sense, So the point of the movie was not to prove that like Hoxie was right or wrong, but it was a natural. His father had noticed that the horses, back when they would make the fences where they would zigzag so they could just stack them and put fence poles in. So they'd make them, anyway, within those little triangles that were along where it wasn't plowed, just whatever was natural grew. And this guy had noticed that the horses that were getting cancers on their legs and stuff, or wherever they were, would go over there and they'd graze around there. And out of what he observed them doing, he made this thing and passed it on. And that seemed to work for a lot of people, and there's a lot of things about what belief and, so there's a whole lot to it, but that openness to other rather than it has to be one or the other. And at that point, the American Medical Association was very, very hard line about what is established medicine, and what is not. And it all did have to do with what things can get monetized, and, there's always been snake oil, right? So, but I feel your passion. And I do think that, there's plenty to show that people being involved in their own healing is essential. You can't just kind of turn it over, to the person who's going to smack you on the forehead or the person who's going to write your prescription. Yeah.
But I do like the documentary because, as you said, you weren't trying to prove that he was right. You showed both sides. You let the doctors have their say, you let the AMAs have their say, and you let Hoxie have his say. You showed clips from him. So the fact that the documentary let the viewer make his own mind. I did
the narration. That's all. All Kenny. He's very Old Testament kind of in his his thinking and his seriousness and commitment to truth and what he does. He
did a great job on it, and I love the narration. So I'm glad that they got you involved because you can relate to it with what happened to you in your own personal life.
Yes, it's funny. I've narrated a few things, and I felt good about doing it, and then I've had people say, you already had to do voiceovers, and when it's so lean, you come through not that I saved so much before I got married anyway, but you come through a terminal illness and all, it's like whatever stash gets eaten up pretty quick. So it's not like I've been, flying way high above the treetops, which is fine with me. I mean, I'm abundance rules, but still, it's possible for people to make some pretty good money doing voiceovers, So I tried it, but I found I didn't know how to, go. The night belongs to Michelob. You know what I mean? I could, somehow, you know what I mean? There's something, I just was,
Yeah. Enjoy that tasty Marlboro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing that too. Now, is Full Circle still in? Are they still making documentaries?
No, I mean, I'm not sure what the status is. I stopped paying taxes some time ago. I don't know if I wanted to like revive it or whatever. I didn't, there was a time in there where a lot of people use Full Circle, and I see that what's his name on CNN has a new, like, I think he's calling his podcast Full Circle or something. But I felt that I had a resonance with anybody who would, it was actually my friend Chingus who came up with the name, so on the other hand, my stuff, the lap, which grew out of that, my work with lap grew out of, I still have these tapes. Gee, I think, they're actually more relevant now than they were back then, or certainly more people would relate to them. Yeah. More people would not find it so woo-woo to talk about planet warming or just, these relationships. And there's a kind of a perspective on some of the real confrontational parts of it, maybe. And I still feel a commitment to what I put into it, but also a lot of other people, and so that's, but what led me in thinking, what might I do with this, was to realize, wow, there's these great tools coming, but people got to have access to them. And I thought there would be a way to I had this notion of places, local, I call them local access places, because it's spelled LAP. I went through, the general learning, organizing, and balancing environment, GLOBE, and so anyway, it came about with LAP, and I, which also I say, wow, that also means local access, people and partners and programs and, policies and pattern, and, so LAP became the macronym. Okay. And also then for learn it, play, and love and peace, and laughter and passion, and looking at possibilities. So that sort of songwriter, divergent thinker in me, embraced this notion of LAP and the metaphor and the macronym. Okay. All the things, because it turns out LAP has a lot of meanings, one being that this fell in my lap, the dictionary says a domain of care, charge, control, and responsibility. I mean, that word domain, I think bears a little examining. Where does that come from in thinking? But as that sense of we have of this land in my lap, or in our but there's also there's things that overlap. There's in engineering, you bonding layers, they fit as one, or engineering parts, so they fit together as one. That's called lapping. So there's all of that. Okay, but the basic idea was, what if there were a show? I thought, well, so Walt Disney combined a real place with television place. Disneyland. It existed on television, and it existed someplace in the world, and they kind of, overlap, so to speak. So what if that's what wants to happen with on air, on land, on air, online? What would that be? And at the time, we had cable access television in communities where cable had come in, and their kind of negotiation with the community is, okay, we'll let you be the monopoly because you don't want to be competing with all that infrastructure, but you got to give us our community channel and our learning channel and our government channel. And, that all got sort of worked out. And often those studios were over in the industrial park somewhere or something, but there were some communities where it was right down in a mall downtown or something that, and at that time there was a kind of a recession going on because there was, and so there was a lot of mall space available. Anyway, that was the vision, that you could have an idea of a place that actually you did from a real one, but it was somewhere, like in South Central or something. But it interlinked with other laps where people had the cameras and the computers, and they could come in and get online, which was like a big deal then, but they could also put their story together, which meant more like working with other, but that would be that idea, would be where people were coming together. And they could make stuff, so kind of like America's Funniest Home Videos, but without the cheesy parameters. It was just, like people could tell their stories, and they could, that was my vision that I was after. I had no idea how to sell it to a network, which I had no idea what the internet was. I had, I really I was kind of like, that's what I was going for. And I found I could go in and meet with cabinet people, and I could meet with people on the res and people, and I think I did a lot of good at bringing people together. And over time I found, people just coming together in a circle and holding a conversation with the center instead of sides. So we started this idea of lap in. We're going to lap in. We're going to, because I remember there were the first sit-ins, and then be-ins, and then love-ins. There was a TV show called Laugh In, and there's something about that languagey, sort of noun-verby thing. And so I lap in as an open invitation and intention to open heart, open mind, open source. Open source, no one owns it, anyone can improve it, everyone can use it. Open source, open space, open game. And an open game is like not a zero-sum game. In an open game, you can have win-win, right? Zero-sum, you got to have win-lose. So we're like, what game are we playing? So. And,
I loved it. I love the whole that you put so much work behind just the name, but you did also great work with the company. But the fact that you have so much meaning behind it makes it even better.
Well, what I mean, as I'm now in my life, I'm saying, okay, now what is the need for maybe us to have something other than a polarized conversation? Maybe is becoming obvious. That isn't some kind of selling out or whatever,
Yeah.
And I did learn over time to trust that, if you circle up, and so the idea would be to go around the circle. Often groups start that, let's check in or whatever. It's not like it's been invented, but the notion that you go around and then go around again, just keep holding that conversation together, can become a way for people to what my experience has been, to have a really good dialogue. It starts to happen, and then everybody's holding it together, and it can be. So I trust it in that way, and in that sense, it is a trust sort of exercise or experience, and so I'm looking for, how to do that even with my friend Sue Walsh, who started a fan page on Facebook for me, so she's putting out all these great clips, which, I've kind of tended to move on, but it's been really fun seeing them, and then the interaction and I'm enjoying this. I feel like I'm certainly going on and on, having a good time doing it.
But you're going on and on with interesting conversation, great subjects. I can listen to you talk all day.
Maybe, somewhere in the near future, I want to be putting out the invite for people to lap in, and just people that I think would be cool to bring together. And I will be extending one to you, and I feel like I'd like to get out there that way. If this is something anyone can, it's a proposal, the local access proposal, so it's that invitation and intention, for engagement,
I can say invitation accepted. I definitely want to be a part of it. I want to, and as you said earlier, it's probably more relevant now. We need what you're discussing with all the polarizing conversations that are going on. If you don't agree with me, I hope you die. I mean, this is how a lot of people are now. So I think we need what you're telling us more than ever right now. And you mentioned earlier that you have a lot of things on video from the past. Is there a way that you're going to digitize it and put it online, or a way people can buy
I'm in
it?
that process. I got a certain amount of it digitized. Some of that I'm trying to track down. But what my thought with all of that, particularly the stuff we shot, in 1980, and then there was some carryover, but is that that was a time when the things that were going on, in a way, I was kind of maybe a link or a help with the American Indian movement and the No Nukes movement. that was going on at the time. And I know now that's coming back around, well, if we're going to save the environment, we're going to have to use nuclear energy. And, I get the argument. It's certainly safer now than it was then, but I'm more in the understanding that that we're just not going to engineer ourselves out of what we've created as a species. We have to find a way to hold back. I know there's a heresy in that how do you imagine that happening? All of our imagination is about what we're going to create. And then, some of it is like, because we're going to get off the earth and we're going to live elsewhere. And all of those things are out there, and I'm only me, but and there's by the way, there's a very good movie called Planet of the Humans, done by a friend of mine who, it was like his direction, his film, but he worked a lot. He's from Flint, Michigan, along with Michael Moore and some other people. My good friend Michael Donnelly, who's up in Oregon, environmental guy. Anyway, they really kind of burst the balloon of we can engineer ourselves out of, even with some of the huge scale engineering projects people are thinking of and stuff, and that we have to come to some other balance with how we live on the earth, and those two are not necessarily in conflict, not necessarily, but the way things are financed and pitched and thought of for the most part today, that's a really good voice to have in the mix, I think. Planet of the Humans. It's on YouTube. So you asked me a question and I digressed a little. All right.
No, what I was saying was, I was asking you if you were going to digitize it and make it available for people that weren't able to watch it back then, because I know everything was on video back then.
Yeah. And I never, it never worked out with the network. I never found a way to, I was always like, how to put these stories together. But over time, I saw there were a lot of other people shooting video then, because video, you were people with small budgets, 16 millimeter film was expensive, and you couldn't shoot a lot of it. Then you had to pay to get it developed. And video, a lot of us went and shot everything, eventually learned, now you got to watch it. So somewhere you start editing a little more in your head and in the camera. But there's a lot of stuff available. And particularly in that realm of Indian law, and where Indian law, is involved with constitutional law and environmental law, and, where these understandings, come together in a good way. And also, what transpired for a lot of young people, because there were some shifts around then where because of reasserting sovereignty rights, that kind of became the gambling thing came in there in a way. So a lot of Indian communities, that were the poorest part of the state were now the biggest employer in the county and stuff, and other Indian areas where they don't have that proximity to an urban area or whatever. So all of those things come into play, how to be with that, how to not let outside forces kind of run the show, but how to have it develop other businesses in the healthcare system. And all of those things were part of what went on in Indian country. But in many ways, like the next generation didn't necessarily know about this time with Floyd and the Indian movement and other people working in other areas. So it wasn't only the movement and I think all of that is important for our history, and especially right now, it's really interesting because for one thing, we're still holding Leonard Peltier in prison. So Leonard was a young man at the time, was involved in a confrontation with the FBI, where 2 FBI agents were killed, also young men at the time, all drawn in on 2 sides of a larger game. All, if you kind of look back, think of them as, 5-year-olds or as young men who wanted to, protect their people and do the, and so, I think it would be really meaningful for Leonard to be cut loose. And at the same time, that's a somewhat different FBI than the FBI today, for a number of reasons, but interestingly, I'm seeing, you know, people that I see as kind of on the wrong side of things, you know, but, you know, Matt Getz and stuff making a case about the FBI being involved in a way that they actually got the people to do all the terrible stuff, you know. It's like, wow, here's the same story that can be made about creating kind of a, anthropomizing an institution. And, you know, so at some level, you know, I have this Lakota expression, matakweyasi, for all my relations. It's kind of like that's the prayer. I mean, I would say a prayer, but you're gathering thoughts and hearts and stuff to say for all my relations, to that we are all related, and to be able to find that within all the kind of misinformation and ways people are bonding around, you know, untruth and kind of distortions, you know, that can kind of, in some ways, there's a whole lot of it that's happening kind of on both sides. Certainly not hearing each other, pointing at the finger that stuff the other side is not seeing. A lot of pointing of fingers, you know, same charges. I know you are, but what am I, kind of?
I know. Well, that's what I mentioned before. I said nobody can have a great conversation or even a debate unless you agree with everything they say. If you don't agree with just one thing, they'll unfriend you, stop talking to you. It's like, I've known you for 30 years. You're going to stop being friends with me because I don't agree with you on one little thing. It's sad where we've come. And there's a great documentary about that called The Social Dilemma, where they said everybody lives in their own little bubble because the way the algorithms work in social media, you click on something, it's going to send 15 to 20, 30, 40 videos of all the same subjects. So you're living in your own little world where everything you agree with is sent to you. The person next to you completely has a different mindset. They're getting 15, 30, 40, 50 videos of what they agree with. So they have a completely different reality. And they said everybody lives in their own level, and they didn't mean it for that. They wanted it more for advertising at first, and it just went out of control. And whoever was they were interviewing said, it's out of control. We need to stop it. But it's beyond that, I think, right now with all the algorithms and what people want to believe and what they're willing to believe. It's just, I don't know how that's ever going to change.
Well, you know, we also had our own algorithms before that, where we would decide whether somebody was worth our time, or, you know, whether they were validating what we thought of, you know what I mean? We do that, you know. It's true that it gets sort of magnified when you think it's actually being spread out and made more you know, but it's definitely real in the sense that it can be exploited by people who want to work it in a way to divide people, misguide people, you know, and I don't know, you know, I don't know what you know, it's like, as I also thought, wow, how easy would it be for people to mess with some idea that you're kind of spreading out this. I'm always looking for the word that would be kind of the same as a virus, but it's not virus, you know, because virus, you know, isn't quite life, or there's something. What's another metaphor that exists when, you know, in the way that meme drew on genes. You know, there was a time where genes was a name somebody came up with. You know, Gregory Bateson's father, the way I understand it, you know, was the one who came up with we'll call them genes. You know, it's somebody came up with memes. It's like a gene, only it's in minds. You know, say, well, so virus is, you know, that went viral, and we're certainly keep learning about viruses, you know, and how they transmute and all of that. But I just think it would be cool if there was something that you know, that evoked a whole other, you know, mode of understanding. So, you know, like what did Einstein say? Time and space are modes in which we think. They're not reality. They're modes in the way we think about things, time and space, you know. So those modes, virus. But I haven't come up with it. Maybe
you're a very creative guy, and I've heard the things you've come up with in the past. If I think of something, I'll email you. If I come up with something, Max, I have it.
Yeah,
we'll come up with a name for that. So you mentioned before, you said you did one on climate change, you did one on Native Americans, or maybe more than one. What else did you do documentaries on?
Well, you know, I mean, what I did was, you know, all around trying to get that show happening, and then what to do with those, you know, what to do with those videos. Once I feel like, okay, I've got them, I've remarried, I have kids on the way, I did another series. I had changed, TV had changed. Yeah. It wasn't a fit. What am I going to do? Well, I still have these, and I feel like I still owe something to, you know, I shouldn't be just, it's not for me to just throw them away or something. A lot of people put time in along with me, you know, and I helped some of the people that shot when we were up in the Akwesasne, up on the Mohawk Reservation early in 1980, and there was a confrontation that had kind of come to a head with, in a way, it was the traditional, the Longhouse people and the more progressive Mohawks, but it involved the state police. And so I was there, and we got this crew up from New York, you know, and they were working on a film on Agent Orange. They called themselves the Human Arts Foundation. They're still around, and they're people who have become, you know, the old caretakers of the New York documentary scene in a way. You know, they've all done very well. They were very committed, but they were working on this Agent Orange, the secret agent. And so I was able to put some money into it and then to narrate it. And they were following the hearings that were going on and the research and so on and so forth around what to do about the fact that this defoliant was spread all over Vietnam, but it was also spread out all over America. Which was one of the reasons it was hard to prove that it was worse for the soldiers, because it had been used in a lot of places, and there was just a certain kind of you know, something that was in the making of it. It wasn't really a functional part of it, but it was a byproduct, and that was causing the people to have these horrendous birth defects and health effects and so on and so forth. And so I did that, you know, got involved with that and narrated that. So, you know, when I'm looking for something to say for myself about, you know, something I did other than Barney Miller, you know, to myself, you know, I did do that, you know, but it was really their commitment. And I thought, you know, and it led to the companies having some realizations. They had a list of 100 questions that this corporation in Midland, Michigan, and I forget which one right now. So I don't. But anyway, it was, you know, it was big. They made Agent Orange, and the questions got them thinking. And it came out that they had kind of a divide within their own company between those that said, we have to stonewall this, you know, as long and as much as we can. And others say, no, we have to face that we did it to ourselves here too. Because we're living where this is too, you know, and certainly led to a settlement, which then became, you know, the issue of, was the settlement big enough and, you know, lasting enough, and which it wasn't, but you know, there's still, you know, it's ongoing. You know, the cost of war goes on and on.
I love the fact that you brought light to all of these things, Agent Orange, climate change, and I am looking very much forward to the day that I can go online, or even I would buy these videos from you, because I would love to see the different subjects that you tackle and what you bring to light.
Well, I think that you know, that's very cool to hear and inspiring, and maybe we could work together on it. You could help get that kind of those kinds of things done, and I think we could maybe overlap on some other just things that we share. I see that we share, you know, definitely. And so let's let's keep that part of
Yeah.
this conversation alive. Very cool.
I see a collaboration in the future. And as I mentioned before I turned on the mic, I love to promote. So
yes, yeah, that's great. That's great. This is very cool.
very cool. All right, I want to talk about something. When I first met you at Chiller Theater, New Jersey, it's a convention where celebrities go and you get to meet them, talk to them, and you were one of the nicest people I ever met. And I appreciate you being on the show. But when I met you the first time, you were talking about Abilities Magazine. What is that?
Yeah, Ability Magazine is a magazine. It's on the newsstands. And it also has a very robust online chat, who I'll talk about in a moment, got going on that way, and is, so, but it is a magazine. The way Chet thinks about Chet Cooper, before he did that, he for a while he produced the Harvard Lampoon, or published. He felt they had gotten away from their real mission of lampooning, and he kind of got it back, on that track, and then he came up with this notion of Ability Magazine. But he has a real lampoon style of humor, and a real, he loves puns. He loves to be, really dry. So at a serious moment, he'll ask a question that really has people kind of what before they realize he's, there have been times I said, that's your disability, your sense of humor. I don't know. So, with the idea in mind that we all have, we'll have changes in our abilities. Some know it better or it happens sooner, but that's just a part of life, is that, but to put the focus on people's abilities rather than disabilities. But, and the magazine usually has some kind of celebrity on the cover. It might be a Washington celebrity, a political celebrity, or a Hollywood celebrity, but connected to a legitimate story of their life, or something very, someone close to them, something within their lives, sharing what their experience with that is. And then also dealing with a lot of the issues, from political to cultural to creative, issues that around the notion of abilities or disabilities. So it's a good magazine. They got a great backlog of interviews with really interesting people and all, and in terms of what the issues in the history of that movement. And I had met Chet at what was it? I first met him at a wheelchair. They had celebrities versus a wheelchair basketball team, but we were all in wheelchairs, and got our asses handed to us. But and then he asked me to participate, actually, with doing one of my poems. But he put together an evening at the Comedy Store with all comedians who had disabilities, differently abled, whatever, wonderful, funny, really good group. So we were friends. And when I had this idea of local access places and people getting access, and it was like, well, who knows more about changing minds and policies and awareness around access than the disability community, the big wheelchair stall in the bathroom. If you're ever a parent with toddlers, boy, those are good for more than just people with wheelchairs, because you can take your kids in there. You don't have to worry about one following the wrong pair of pants out into the mall, and all of that curb cuts, creative roller suitcases, and are allowed them, and so that we spent a lot of time together, actually doing different things. Some of them sort of government related or HUD related or whatever, with the the thing that Jimmy Carter's always been involved with. I can't say it right now, but I'm sure you know what I mean. The home building, not for profit that builds home.
It is. Yeah, I'm not sure what it's called, but I see videos of him doing it all the time. And you know what I'm so glad about? Because unfortunately, he became president at the time of the recession. Then, as you mentioned earlier, the Iran hostage crisis. Now that he's getting his due. He has done so much good for people, and he's in his 90s. He's building houses, helping the disadvantaged. And I love the fact that he finally got his due and he finally got his respect, because you could always tell he was a great guy. I mean, it wasn't his fault that he became president in one of a horrible time, the recession, the hostage crisis. I mean, everything was going wrong for him. No matter who was in office at that time, it would have been
Habitat for Habitat for Humanity. And Chevy started this ability house where they would not only build a house for someone who qualified, but they had disabilities. But they built it so that, you know, when you're building, it's not that harder to make lower counters for someone in a wheelchair, or put in a ramp to the house, you know, or any of these things that should be part of code, make every house visitable, you know. But also, you know, it just, his vision was to use people with disabilities as volunteers on the job, to change that perception of, you know, oh, you have a disability, you can only get help, you know, you can't be of help. And so that was that project. Well, Jimmy, you know, I mean, there were other things that happened with Jimmy Carter too, you know. It's like, I mean, in there with like the hostage crisis, and, you know, what really happened with that, with you know, escape attempt, you know, was that sabotage, or, you know, there's, you know, politics that and a lot of things you know, changed as a result of Ronald Reagan becoming president, you know. So,
well, you know what I love about that magazine? I want to go back to it for a minute, because I like the fact that he highlights people with disabilities, but people that don't treat themselves as a victim. And I'll tell you what I mean. Like, I was born with cerebral palsy. When I was born, I was given the last rites 3 times. They said I would never walk, never talk. Over the years, I played baseball, had the highest average in the league. I was a singer in a band. I did stand-up comedy. I was in radio for a little while. I wrote a book. I do motivational speaking, and now I do this podcast, and I had to show. So I never, ever once thought of myself as a victim. I never once let my CP get in the way of anything I want to do. Anything I put my mind to, I did.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that this magazine highlights people like that, who other people might say, oh, look at him, I feel so bad. No, don't feel bad for me. Don't feel bad for this person. They're probably doing more than you. And it's funny because when I tell people what I do, they're, wow, you're making me feel lazy.
Well, you know, it's, I mean, you know, it's inspiring and validating of, you know, things that I know of life and of humanity and all. And you know, a lot of times, a lot of victimhood is taught, you know, and there are, you know, there's varieties of the help that people need to function. So, and some people do need a lot of help, you know, but that's not the same as feeling like a victim. And you know, not that, I mean, you know, the feeling like a victim kind of is not, there's you know, it spreads around. There's a lot of it going on with people who have absolutely no reason whatsoever. They've been so privileged, you know, and so blessed, you know, but their sense of victimhood is like, you know, really going on there, you know. So there is that, you know, but I think that the resonance, the vibration of just what you're saying and feeling it, you know, is like, it's really good for it to be heard, for you know, it's contagious.
Well, it's funny that what you said about people who make themselves a victim, and I'm going to give you an example for this too. My brother's wife is dying of pancreatic cancer, and I hear people complaining about something. I said, I bet you my brother's wife wishes she had your problem. And then they look at me and shut up. They realize, yeah, I really shouldn't be complaining about it. My life really isn't that bad. You know, if you put everything into perspective, most people's life, I mean, I'm just saying people that really shouldn't treat themselves as a victim. Some people really do have it bad. I'm not talking about them.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the people that, oh, it's so bad, this and that. Like,
Yeah.
look at the big picture. You're healthy,
Yeah.
you have a job, you have a great place to live. Life is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, more power to you, brother. You know.
Yeah.
So,
No, luckily, I'm able to look at myself. You know, I'm instead of thinking, you know, going ahead and saying, "Boy, I wish I felt like that back then." I'm able to look right now and say, "I'm really lucky," and that's how I've always felt, and I've always lived my life, and that's why everybody says you're always so happy, and that's the reason. I know how lucky I am and happy I am. Yeah.
That's very cool. So, what is your like family situation? Do you have any kids? Do you have you know?
I have a fiance, which I'll be getting married sometime soon. We were going to get married, and then we got a condo. We said, all right, so we wanted to do a destination wedding. I said, let's do it next year. That was 2020 when COVID hit. So it's on hold right now, but we're living together, having a great life together, and there's no rush for it. It's going to happen, but yeah, it's just me and her, and then I have two brothers, and my parents live in Cape Cod. So my family's healthy. My parents are good.
Where on the Cape?
Dennisport.
Where?
Dennisport. Dennisport.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I told them I was interviewing you, and they were very excited. They
I played
love you.
I think actually 2 summers, I think, out at the Wawinut Casino out in the kind of the far end of the highway on Nantucket.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never been there, but I definitely know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a great place. I love Nantucket. I love Martha's Vineyard. Nice area.
So
go ahead.
Oh, I'm just I'm curious about let's see, you've told me about your book. I think I'll check that out. Okay.
Let me give you a warning. It's 5 short stories, and it's more in the vein of Twilight Zone, where there's a twist to it, and it's 5 horror / suspense, but there's also a lot of comedy in there. As I mentioned, I did stand-up comedy, so I love humor, and I inject a lot of humor into the story. So it's a little bit of everything. And it's funny because
did you do like clubs back east, or did you travel around a lot, or what?
I did 9 different states. I did Connecticut, New York, New Hampshire, Maine, Tennessee, New Jersey, and there's like 3 other states I can't remember right now, but yeah, I did 9 different states. My biggest show, which was I talked about earlier, but I said I love the fact that you take your opportunities when you get them, and that equals success. Did you ever hear of a comedian named Jeff Ross? They called him the Roast Master General. He does a lot of the roasts.
Yeah.
I was in
I don't have
Tennessee.
a beat on him right now, but yeah. So go ahead.
If you saw a picture of him, you know who he was. He's a big comedian. He mostly is known for his roast. And he was on stage. I went to Tennessee to visit my friend, and there was a club called Zanies, or it's still there. It's one of the major comedy clubs. And he was the headliner. And he said, you know what? I'm known as the Roast Master General. I want to try something new. I'm going to bring up 20 people on stage, and I'm going to roast them. I was on the upper deck. I must have just jumped. I don't know how fast I got there. I just made it on stage, and Jeff Ross you can tell he's looking at me, and he goes, and I have my right hand is affected with cerebral palsy. So he goes, so what do you do for a living? I said, well, I work during the day and I'm a stand-up comedian by night. And I hear people say, give him the mic, give him the mic. And I said, it's my big break. So he looks at my hand, he goes, it looks like you already had your big break. Ha ha ha. So he's laughing. So he looked at me, he said, when you have something funny to say, let me get back to you. So he roasts everybody else on stage, comes back to me, goes, show me what you got. So I got to do my stand-up act in front of a sold-out crowd. The place was cheering so loud, I couldn't even hear myself talk. I will never forget that show, and it all happened to be just because I happened to be at the right place at the right time. I took advantage of that opportunity. So but I performed in a lot of the major, like in New York, stand-up New York. I did Gotham Comedy Club. I did the Rhode Island Comedy Connection. So in the different states, I did a lot of the major comedy clubs. I had a great time doing it, but it was more of a hobby because there's not really for me at that level. There's not a lot of money, and I did it for about 4 years. Which I said, I told you off the air that led to motivational talks, which I'm having a great time doing that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I mean, it's tough. The clubs and the life and the, it's I've been seeing a lot on TikTok, I guess, and Facebook. They're showing a lot of videos, a lot of young stand-ups, Yeah. And so I see, well, great. There's a lot of, and they're all pretty good. At least they're 3-4 minutes you're seeing, but tough going, especially now with COVID and all that, I mean,
COVID, there's the two C's, COVID and the cancel culture. So between those two things where everything somebody says is taken out of context, let's ban him. He's no longer allowed. But then people are looking at things they're filming with their camera, and people are seeing jokes that they're just trying out and they're not fully formulated yet. And, but this guy stinks. No, you got to try your jokes out first. So I hate the fact that, it's a really tough time to be a comedian.
Yeah.
With everything that's going on. It's like, you say something that might offend somebody.
Yeah.
Let's ban him.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, there's COVID. I can't go to the show. I might get sick. Oh, wait a minute. We already saw your act on YouTube.
Yeah. Is that all you got? Yeah,
exactly.
So, but at the same time, like my friend Wavy is known for saying, when you lose your sense of humor, it's just not funny anymore. So
I agree with you, or him. Yeah.
All right.
Definitely very cool. All right, now on to what everybody knows you for mostly, Barney Miller.
Okay.
All of a sudden I hear, brim, brim. What's a diaphragm again? Ha! We caught one.
They're supposed to be weird.
Oh, yeah, no. If you say so.
I've always wanted to be in a movie.
Waiting around for autumn, waiting around for autumn.